So today we got this article on Bleacher Report from Christopher Knox about the best and worst landing spots for potential quarterbacks who could change teams in 2026. I see Kirk Cousins on the profile, so I assume we're going to talk about him first. And of course, we are. So it's saying the best landing spot is Minnesota and the worst is the Jets. So, first of all, honestly, I think the best landing spot for Kirk is actually to stay in Atlanta. Michael Penix tore his ACL, wasn't a full tear, but partial tear late in the season. So honestly, Kirk, who's had experience with Stefanski, I think staying there and kind of keeping the level of play that he had down the stretch would actually be really beneficial, not only for Kirk, but also for the Atlanta Falcons. So I actually think the best spot is him staying. I do get going back to Minnesota because Mr. Nine was playing so terribly, but I think staying put is honestly the best deal. In the worst landing spot, the Jets. Honestly, I really don't even think the Jets would be that bad of a landing spot either. Um, because I mean they have decent weapons, Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall. That's actually a decent defensive or offensive line, so they can figure out the defense. I think that actually would not be a horrible spot to come in and start for a year. They're clearly not going to be able to draft Dante Moore because he's staying at Oregon, but I think honestly going to the Jets legit would actually not be that bad for Kirk if he does end up leaving Atlanta. But I think personally, I think staying in Atlanta does actually make the most sense for Kirk at this point. Next up, oh, Justin Fields. Can we just stop with Justin Fields? He is not a good NFL quarterback. He has never been a good NFL quarterback. The best landing spot for him is honestly the UFL. Go join the St. Louis Battlehawks or like the Arlington Renegades, whatever they're called now. He is not a good quarterback. He has shown 5 different seasons now of not being a good quarterback. Why are we even remotely entertaining this idea? No. Best landing spot? Nowhere. There's not a single good landing spot. Worst landing spot? Anywhere he goes. He is not a good quarterback. Ugh, don't even get me started on that. All right, next up, Joe Flacco saying the Falcons. So I actually don't think going to the Falcons makes as much sense. We saw even this season with Stefanski on the Browns team, he didn't have a great level of play. Then he went to Cincinnati and suddenly was rejuvenated. So I don't think just automatically pairing back up with Stefanski really makes sense for him there. So I personally don't get that. Worst landing spot, Steelers. I actually kind of like the Steelers more. I would actually flip these honestly, because I think completing the AFC North, completing playing for all those teams would just be objectively funny. But to go in Pittsburgh, start for a year, just give them a solid level of quarterback play as they kind of start this new era post Mike Tomlin, I actually don't think would be the worst thing in the world. Go in, be a decent starter. You have DK Metcalf. You have some talent with Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, Johnny Smith. So I would legit flip these. I think Pittsburgh would be a better landing spot than I think it would be for him to go to Atlanta. And next up, Daniel Jones, best landing spot, Indianapolis. Yeah, that makes sense. Worst landing spot, Cleveland. Yeah, those both perfectly make sense. Definitely no reason for him to leave if he can come back and actually start week one and kind of pick up where he left off last year. I think that is a legit no brainer. Because they didn't happen to actually finish first or second in the division, they are going to have an easier schedule. So I do think there's a chance where he comes back and looks pretty good and healthy again and can kind of pick up where he left off before the injury. Worst landing spot, Cleveland. Yeah, any coach, quarterback, anyone in free agency, there's no reason to go to this Cleveland Browns team right now. So going there, I think, would be a huge mistake. Now, next up, Kyler Murray, best landing spot, the Rams. I somewhat agree with this. I think this would be good for Kyler Murray post. So, I mean, we're assuming that Matthew Stafford retires this season and this is their next move. I don't see an interdivisional trade like this actually happening. So, to me, that doesn't make sense. What I think would actually be really, really good is either Pittsburgh or the Jets. Specifically, I think Pittsburgh's probably my favorite landing spot for Kyler Murray because the way the Steelers organization is set up is they're not designed to be bad. They constantly want to be competing. They don't want to take a season off. They don't want to tank. They don't want to rebuild. So trading for Kyler Murray now is going to give him the highest possible level of quarterback play at the lowest value, because you can probably get Kyler Murray for maybe a second, third round pick. Like, I think his value is genuinely that low. The downside is you do have to pay him. He does have a big contract, but giving up a second or third round pick for a top 16 quarterback is going to be a lot better than trying to invest in the middle of the draft for somebody who's probably not going to be a starter. So, unless they want to tear it down to the studs and rebuild, which I just don't see that happening with Pittsburgh, I think going to Pittsburgh would be mutually beneficial for Kyler and the Steelers. And even same thing for the Jets. Instead of waiting for Dante Moore or trying to go draft some young guy who's unproven, as we've seen year after year after year, the Jets cannot develop a quarterback. So why don't we just go get one who's already proven to be a starter? Good offensive line, Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, and Kyler Murray. That's an offense I do like the sound of. So frankly, I think that would be a great decision for either the Jets or Steelers. Worst landing spot is Minnesota. That almost feels like a Sam Darnold esque season if he goes to Minnesota. Kind of just like a bridge, kind of rehabilitation year, perhaps, and then move on. So I don't hate that. I definitely think the Rams makes the least sense because I just don't see him being traded interdivision. I wouldn't hate the Vikings, but it could be worse, I suppose. But definitely, I think Pittsburgh or the Jets would actually be a great trade for Kyler Murray. And now, next up, Aaron Rodgers going to Minnesota is what they say the best spot would be, while saying the worst would be any other team than Minnesota or Pittsburgh. Uh, I what do I think of that? Yeah, I don't hate that. I think it would be sacrilegious growing up an Aaron Rodgers fan, seeing him in a Minnesota Vikings jersey. But I guess he does have to complete the Brett Favre arc of playing for the Giants and Vikings post Packers. Honestly, though, really, I think Minnesota makes sense. I just don't know if I want to see it. I think Atlanta could be a really good fit if they happen to move on from Kirk. So bringing Aaron Rodgers may be cheap, and that's going to give you a decent floor at quarterback to pair with Bijan, Drake London. I think Drake London's probably someone he could develop a lot of chemistry with. So I would actually say Atlanta, and we saw him have success in a similar wide zone scheme with LaFleur as we did as Stefanski runs. So I actually think Atlanta would be my favorite landing spot. I hate the Vikings, but that's just for the aesthetic reason. But Pittsburgh, if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm probably not bringing him back unless you're hoping he can kind of help teach and mentor Will Howard. And next up, Tua Tagovailoa or Tua Turn the Ball Over. Best landing spot, the Rams. I guess, if anything, I would say Atlanta. Send him somewhere where he doesn't have to play outdoors, which I guess the Rams make sense. If I'm the Rams, I don't know if I want to pair. I don't want to bring Tua in. I would rather just see. I'd even rather see what I have in Stetson Bennett or anyone else besides Tua. I just don't want to pay him that much. So even if they cut him, I would rather even see Jimmy Garoppolo, who's already on the roster. I'd rather bring in a Joe Flacco. Like, I just think he's not a good quarterback, frankly. So best landing spot for Tua, I think, would be the Rams. I don't think for the Rams, Tua would be the best option for them to bring in. Uh, Worst landing spot, I don't think he could survive that New York media. So I do agree this would be bad. He was already having a bunch of crazy interviews this offseason. So I definitely think the Jets would be really bad and he would really become mocked. I also don't really see him going interdivision like that. But I will say, I think my personal favorite might be Atlanta with Stefanski to kind of be a better version, I guess, of what Dylan Gabriel was for the Browns this season. But wide zone scheme, you're playing in a dome. Even, some of the teams that you're playing in your own division, New Orleans, dome, Carolina doesn't get that cold, Tampa stays warm. So even in your own division, you're not going to have to worry about those cold winter games as much. So I think Atlanta, to me, is actually my favorite of any of the teams that he could go to. And then next up, Malik Willis. That's interesting. So he looks like he's going to get an absolute bag this year. So to go follow Halfley down to Miami could be very interesting. He's going to have Achan, a good running game, Jalen Waddle, maybe Tyreek Hill comes back. So I think that could actually be a phenomenal fit for Willis. And that can give Halfley someone to attach himself to at quarterback. And maybe he ends up being a long term starter. Maybe he just played well in a short spurt, but he definitely looked like he has significantly improved. So putting him with Halfley falling over from Green Bay, I think makes a lot of sense for both parties. Worst landing spot definitely would be the Cleveland Browns. No quarterback ever succeeds there. If he goes there, I think he's just going to blow up his only real chance of starting. So I actually agree perfectly with this one. And then next up, Russell Wilson. Best landing spot, the Kansas City Chiefs. Worst landing spot, the Browns. Uh, I'm trying to process this. Russell Wilson in Kansas City would be absolutely disgusting. And Kansas City, I feel like their offense has become a lot more kind of quick passing, more underneath, as opposed to kind of like this explosive deep passing. I don't really trust Russell Wilson in kind of the short, quick, intermediate game. I think that's where he struggles. So I actually think that would be a disaster and really ruin his Hall of Fame case. Uh, if he had to go anywhere, I really don't even know. I don't even think he's going to be a starter. I think he has to go be a backup somewhere. I'm not bringing him in to start. Why are they saying this? Unlikely to find a true starting opportunity, but it could make sense as a bridge option for the Chiefs. If anything, I'd rather bring in Joe Flacco if I'm the Chiefs. If I'm Russ, at this point, I might even consider retiring, honestly, just so you don't hurt your Hall of Fame chances even more. Worst landing spot would be the Browns. Honestly, I think if anybody was going to go to Cleveland, I think he has enough of this resolve, I guess to say, to actually go in and still keep positive morale and try to be a leader. So I actually, same thing. I think I would actually flip this. I think I'd rather see Russ in Cleveland than I would see him on the Chiefs, for frankly both organizations. But overall, that's actually not a bad article. I do disagree with most of them, if I'm being honest. But it's definitely an interesting look to see what kind of quarterback shakeup we could have this offseason. But go ahead, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Where do you think these quarterbacks are going to end up? Do you agree with where I think they should go, or do you have something else in mind? Let's go ahead, let me know, and we'll see you next time.